Welcome back to Hidden Car Gems, the channel where we talk about cars that make absolutely no sense. Today's car isn't even a car. It's a monster made of steel, diesel, and way too much torque. A warhammer on wheel, built to haul, drag, and destroy anything in its path. The kind of machine your granddad dreamed of, your neighbor fears, and your mechanic prays you never own. This is the story of how a humble farm truck became one of America's toughest, loudest, and most respected legends. The Dodge Ram 2500. And if you've ever heard a 12-valve Cummins wake up on a cold morning, you already know that sound isn't just noise, it's religion. Before the 2500 badge meant anything, Dodge was building the D&W series. Square, simple, and brutally honest. These were not fashion statements. They were tools. They rattled, they shook, they did the job, and they didn't apologize for it. Then 1989 happened. Dodge teamed up with Cummins, the folks who built engines for machines that move continents, and dropped a 5.9-liter 12-valve inline-six turbo diesel into a light-duty pickup. Power was roughly 160 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. In the late 80s, that was like bringing a jackhammer to a pillow fight. At idle, it sounded like a bucket of bolts under the hood. Rev it, and the turbo whistle like a kettle about to blast. Farmers loved it because it worked. Mechanics respected it because it lasted. Truckers nodded because it pulled overnight. Dodge, the underdog, had a pickup that could outpull the big names. No chrome hype, no slick slogans, just the kind of torque that moves stubborn things. That was the spark that hit the legend. A few years later, Dodge tore up its own rulebook. The 1994 Ram arrived with a face like a shrunken big rig and shoulders that looked carved from a shipping container. This wasn't the other choice anymore. This was the truck people wanted. Under the hood, you could pick your poison. A 5.9 Magnum V8 with 230 horsepower and 330 pound-feet. A wild 8-liter V10 with 310 horsepower and 450 pound-feet. Or the diesel everyone whispered about, the 5.9 Cummins, making up to 215 horsepower and 440 pound-feet. Numbers on paper only tell part of the story. The way it shoved you down the road with a trailer hooked up told the rest. Those early 12-valve trucks earned cult status because of what lived on the side of the block. The P7100 mechanical injection pump, the famous P-pump. It was simple, overbuilt, and generous. Feed it a little more fuel and it paid you back with more torque like it was laughing at physics. 500,000 miles wasn't a fantasy. It was a plan. Then halfway through 1998, Dodge switched to the 24-valve ISB. It ran smoother, it sounded cleaner, and it hit 500 pound-feet. In small towns across America, kids learned the difference between a 12-valve and a 24-valve before they learned to parallel park. You heard a second-gen Ram spool up on Main Street. You didn't just look, you listened. By 2003, the heavy-duty Ram grew up again. The body got sharper, the frame got tougher, and the engine bay became a battleground. The Hemi returned as a 5.7-liter V8 with 345 horsepower and 375 pound-feet. A proper gas option with a proper bark. But diesel fans had their eye on the final evolution of the 5.9 Cummins. This time it used common rail injection, and everything changed. Factory output climbed to 325 horsepower and 610 pound-feet. The idles smoothed out, response sharper, and the tuning potential went through the roof. It was quieter and cleaner, but when you asked for it, the old sledgehammer was still there. Fuel systems are the quiet heroes of the story. The early 12 valves ran that legendary P-pump and would happily make more power every time you looked at them funny. The late 90s, 24-valve trucks moved to the VP44. Electronically controlled, cleaner running, but pickier about heat and voltage. Then Common Rail arrived with the CP3 high-pressure pump, and that's why the 5.9 CR is still the internet's sweetheart. The perfect blend of old-school iron and modern brains. Tough as a barn door with the finesse of a surgeon's hand. Transmissions earned their own reputations. Second-gen automatics like the 47RE and 48RE were fine at stock power, but they didn't love abuse. Turn the power up and they let you know what they thought of your life choices. The manuals, NV4500, NV5600, and later G56 turned these trucks into mile-eaters. Clutch in, big pull, no drama. And as the 6.7 era dawned, the 68 RFE automatic showed up everywhere. Healthy? It behaved. Pushed too far? It showed its limits. Which is why truck people repeat the same line with a smile. Torque solves problems as long as your transmission can take the joke. By the way, if you've ever let your diesel warm up a little longer just to hear the turbo settle, you're one of us. Stick around. The story is still climbing. Then came 2007, and a half The moment the 5.9 bowed out and the 6.7-liter Cummins took the stage. On paper, it was a beast. 350 horsepower and 650 pound-feet. Under the skin, it bought new tech. A variable geometry turbo EGR and a diesel particulate filter. That kept the regulators happy and the smoke in check, but it also made the engine bay a more complicated neighborhood. On a good day, the 6.7 was unstoppable. On a bad day, it was expensive. The thing is, once people figured out how to tune it and maintain them properly, the trucks woke up in ways that defied their size. 4-digit torque numbers stopped being legends and started being Tuesday. In 2010, Ram became more than a model name. It became its own badge. With that identity came a full-scale push to refine everything without losing the backbone. Interiors moved up a league. Better materials, bigger screens, cleaner layouts, and in the higher trims, available massaging seats. Yes, really, a heavy-duty truck that could tow all day and pamper your spine on the way home. Underneath the leather and stitching, the numbers kept climbing. The 5.7 Hemi made 383 horsepower and 400 pound-feet. The 6.4 Hemi raised the bar to 410 horsepower and 429 pound-feet. The 6.7 Cummins pushed to 370 horsepower and 800 pound-feet. And then in 2014, Ram did something nobody expected. Coiled springs in the rear with optional air suspension. A heavy-duty truck that could still tow big, still carry serious payload, and ride like it meant it. For the first time, the commute to job sites didn't feel like a workload. Choice cemented the Ram 2500's reputation in the 2010s. You could spec a no-nonsense tradesman with vinyl floors and a bed full of dents by Friday, or you could go Laramie Unlimited with cooled seats, wood trim, and a cabin that felt more executive than excavator. And then there's the Power Wagon. Lockers, a disconnecting sway bar, a factory winch, and a stance that dares you to find a mountain. It doesn't chase max tow numbers like the diesel, it chases horizons. Same backbone, totally different mission. One version hauls concrete, the other hauls you into the wilderness. Owners don't just buy a truck, they dial in their truck. In 2019, the 5th generation Ram 2500 arrived, and the whole package moved up. Lighter where it could be, stronger where it had to be, quieter everywhere. Open the door and it feels like a luxury lounge. A 12-inch touchscreen dominates the dash. You get 360-degree cameras, advanced driver aids, and build quality that makes you forget you're in a 3/4 ton. You can even spec available massaging seats. Yes, in a truck that still thinks boulders are just oddly shaped speed bumps. But the essence never changed. Under the hood, the 6.4 Hemi V8 delivers 410 horsepower and 429 pound-feet. The 6.7 Cummins diesel brings 370 horsepower and 850 pound-feet. It can tow up to around 20,000 pounds, depending on configuration. It'll haul an entire job's worth of materials and still glide home like a family car. Some brands softened their heavy duties into crossovers with beds. Ram didn't. Ram built a worker that wears a tux. Look back over the timeline and you see evolution without compromise. From a clattery 5.9 making 160 horsepower and 400 pound-feet in the late 80s to a quiet 6.7 pushing 850 pound-feet today, the Ram 2500 carried the same DNA through every redesign. Strength first. Excuses? Never. Gas engines grew from rough magnums to refined Hemis. Diesels climbed from farm tool torque to freight train shove. Every generation brought more power, more comfort, and more character. But the mission stayed the same. Do the work and make it home. There's also the culture, the parts you can't dyno, meetups, where 3 generations of Ram line up, granddad square body workhorse, dad 2nd gen with a tuned 12 valve, and a brand new 5th gen idling like nothing's happening. Stories about 500,000-mile odometers that still turn. Winter mornings when the heater takes its time, but the truck doesn't complain. That thin whistle of a turbo pushing into a headwind on an empty highway. Every diesel owner knows that song. The Ram 2500 didn't just move payload, it moved people. It gave small businesses a backbone, pulled families into their first campers, and taught a generation what torque actually feels like. In the end, it's simple. A Ram 2500 will idle at 1600 RPM all day, pull a trailer the weight of a small moon, and then drive home like it's nothing. It's simple where it should be, smart where it helps, and mean where it matters. Work first, flex second. That's why it lasts. That's why it's respected, and that's why it earns its place here on Hidden Car Gems. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and tell me which generation of the Ram 2500 you'd take home. And remember, torque solves problems as long as your transmission can take the joke.